Let's talk about trauma cycling. We talked about what the trauma bond is and how we end up bonding with somebody through traumatic euphoria and all this kind of stuff. But let's talk about the cycle itself. What happens in trauma cycling and why does it occur? It could start in childhood, it could start in later life within our first few relationships, or it could start in our later relationships in adulthood. And we start building a comfortability amongst the trauma and it becomes familiar to us. So without even knowing it, we seek it out, we attract it. We attract equal energies. And unfortunately, a lot of the times we polarize this bullshit, let's be honest, into our lives. So what exactly is trauma cycling? So first you have life, living it as normal, right? And then you have tension building. Okay, that could be tension building and wanting to talk about an important topic with your partner. There could be tension building because your partner comes home and is non-responsive and not engaging, and you're just waiting for the triggers to drop, or you're waiting for the conflict to arise. Or say you have to talk to them about something important with the kids, or the kids have an important event. Say you have an important event with your family, whatever it may be, right? And that tension is building because you know you have to deal with these things. You have to deal with the finances or something else critical. And you just know in your gut it's not going to go well, right? So this tension is mounting and you notice the other person is shifting, right? That dominant person is starting to shift. And the weaker, more submissive person is starting to get anxious, is starting to have fear built up, right? We become terrified. And then boom, there's the incident, right? There's the incident where either you can't control your feelings, it starts to go sideways and you go in a panic and you have that desperation, that pleading, like, I'm just trying to get you to understand. Why don't you understand me? Why don't you love me? Isn't this important to you? Or you go the other way with getting angry. You know, I don't understand. Why don't you care about this? Or the other person gets angry. You know, we shouldn't be talking about this. This is stupid. How many times do we have to talk about this? No matter what, it turns into an argument because most of the time, only one person cares. The person that was intimidated, the person that's fearful about bringing up these topics or wanting the inclusion and whatever, they become desperate at trying to figure this out, or they become reactive to the responses of typically a narcissist or somebody who doesn't fully understand how to communicate in relationships. Doesn't always mean they're narcissistic. A lot of times they're just naive and not understanding how a relationship functions, and they don't have those skills yet. So there is a difference. Narcissists are hurtful people that don't care about what they're doing to other people, where normal human beings going through learning and just humanity throughout life make the efforts to change. So there's a big difference. So we have that tension buildup. Now we have the incident. Leads to an explosion, right? And now we have that reconciling, right? We're connecting back together where one person, and it's typically that person who is begging, pleading, the person who is yelled and screamed at, they're typically going to be the ones who come back and reconcile and apologize. They're going to come back with empathy because they can't handle the tension. They want it to go away. They want to take it away. They want to heal. They want to move on. Right? And it's usually just that one person, and the other person, of course, is going to cave. And a lot of times, if it's the other person, the more dominant, controlling energy or the narcissist coming in, they are going to reconcile physically. They don't typically apologize. They don't typically try to find that peaceful, even keel. They're going to go with the physicality. They're not going to say, I'm sorry. They're going to jump to some sort of physical gratification instead of jumping to emotional healing or validation. And then after that, we have the calm, right? We have the peace back and everything's great. But if you sit back and realize nothing was ever solved, problems were not solved, and then what's going to happen because that problem wasn't solved? We still didn't talk about that. Ooh. And then you wait for the next day, or you wait for 5 days, or whatever that time frame is, and that tension builds up again because that wound wasn't healed, or that bill wasn't paid, or that family trip hasn't been planned yet. Whatever it is, we got to deal with it again because it was never actually dealt with. And then those responses are going to be harder. right? So we cycle this trauma in individual relationships, and then that turns into cycling it in the next relationship. So if we get out of that toxic relationship, we're like, yeah, done with that. I am never going back to that. I am never going to put myself in that situation again. I can't believe I got there. Oh, who's this fella, right? And we get all excited, and we get love bombed, or we have that high chemistry, and we go right back into it because we want that high chemistry. We need that love, right? We need that love. We need somebody to fulfill us and fill us up because we're not good enough. We haven't healed ourselves, and we haven't dealt with the bullshit from the last person. So here we are energetically attracting the same thing. It's just the same thing in a different shell. Different person, same shit, pal. So we got to deal with it all over again. And that means that we now have a tremendous amount of triggers that we're carrying over into the next relationship. It could be triggers from that prior person or people, triggers from our childhood, or triggers that are now being built in by this new person. So when triggers are built from childhood, that's typically because we didn't have our love languages met. It doesn't mean that it was a bad parent. You could have a narcissistic parent, but it could just be that they don't understand your love language. I've talked before about mine being touch. I wanted touch, 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 touch. I wanted song to be goofy. My siblings are very much different than from what I am. So it's important to know the love languages of your children because it can lead to trauma. More serious traumas are that of narcissists who just neglect the feelings of their kids, and then that turns into abandonment issues. If kids were abandoned by their parents, that turns into trauma and triggers in adulthood. And then that's for the relationship to deal with, right? We attract typically what our parents were to us. Our role models, we seek that, whether we realize it or not. We find qualities in other people that reflect them. And then we do the same thing in relationships. So if we failed one time and we don't heal ourselves and we don't take the time to reflect on how we ended up in that crappy situation in the first place, we're going to regenerate that in the next relationship. And we're going to pull people in that treat us like dirt, that hold us down, that suppress us, that lie, that cheat, that do all this stuff that we said we'd never end up back in before. It's going to be euphoric and amazing and too good to be true once again, as it always is. And then as time goes, those lies are going to start falling out. It's going to be really hard. The triggers will start wearing on you, and the triggers are actually emotional responses that stack up in the body. They don't leave. If we don't deal with them, they stay within the body, and that causes physical, chemical responses within the body because they are being held and suppressed. Until we learn how to let those energies go, whether it's through Reiki, whether it's through counseling, whether it's through regression therapy, whatever modality that you use, you're not going to be able to move forward from these things, and you're going to be stuck in these trigger trauma cycling responses. So you want to make sure that you reflect and heal and deal with it. You want to get those stuck energies out. If you don't get these stuck energies out, it can lead to PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and this can happen with anything in life, whether it's medical illnesses, things like that, traumatic events, or relationship trauma. It can happen from emotional damage. And the more you live out these trauma cycles, the bigger your outbursts are going to be because you're holding these triggers in from numerous other people now because you can't figure it out, and you're taking them into the next one, and it's just exacerbating. The outbursts are more, the emotions are much more extreme, your meltdowns are more extreme, your heart is broken even more, you're pulling in even worse people every time because your energy vibration is dropping each time, and you're pulling that in. And we definitely don't want to be doing that. You know, there's a lot of different ways that you can be triggered, a lot of ways that you can be abused. That can be physical trauma, emotional trauma, financial trauma, using the children against you or the pets against you. It could be creating isolation and not allowing you that time with friends and family. It could be them coming from a place of privilege and you coming from a place where you are not living that same life and you're going without. It could be sexual trauma where they're withholding or where they're giving to other people and they're cheating on you. It could be threats, and they don't have to be threatening your life. It could be threats of leaving. I'm going to leave you if you keep opening your mouth. I'm not going to deal with this. Power and control, There's a lot of things that go on to this emotionally, financially, intimidations and things like that. If you want to get out, let's learn about the Power Wheel. If this resonated, click the button down below for the next one.